Thanks, Johan. Welcome to all of our panelists today. I'm Amanda Rosenberg. I'm a partner with Norton Rose Fulbright's Los Angeles office. Today, we're going to be talking about renewable energy. We're very lucky to have three panelists here who are all coming from different parts of the renewable energy sector. So to kick off, I'd like to send it over to Becky as our first panelist to quickly talk about what she does in the renewables industry. Then we'll go around the horn and get everybody's role. Becky?
Sure. Thanks, Amanda. My name is Becky Atkinson. I'm the Environmental and Services Manager at the Volvo Cars manufacturing site in Ridgeville, South Carolina, which is just outside of Charleston, South Carolina. We started production in fall of 2018, so we're just now celebrating our 2-year anniversary of operation. We're the only manufacturing facility for Volvo in the Americas, so including North and South America. We currently manufacture the S60, the smallest sedan, and we're working towards rolling out and producing the all-electric and hybrid XC90 in 2022, or starting in 2022. I started with Volvo in 2015, writing the air permit for the site, and since then I've been responsible for establishing all the environmental programs, including our zero waste to landfill program and our waste services. And I'm also responsible for our climate neutral strategy for the plant. Volvo has established a goal for all of our manufacturing sites to be climate neutral by 2025. So we have an on-site solar project that we completed and brought online earlier this year. And we are also looking at biogas and large scale solar operations, as part of that strategy.
Great, thanks. Armin?
Yeah, thanks Amanda, and thanks for having me. So I'm SANDHOEVEL, Chief Investment Officer, Infrastructure Equity of Allianz Global Investors. I'm based in New York, but I'm responsible for the green infrastructure investment strategy globally. So we have also offices in Europe and in Asia Pacific. Before that, I founded the Allianz Climate Solutions, the competence center of green investment and market intelligence of the whole Allianz group. So I'm in the group now for 20 years. First job in the group was project finance for renewable energy, so a longer time ago. And my first steps I did with German government, so-called German Council of Environmental Advisors. So I'm in the business for a long, long time now.
Great, thanks. Hans Christian?
Yeah, I'm country manager of Eolus North America. I've been doing renewables for 15 years, and we are a development company. So we supply companies like Volvo with clean green power. Previously, before moving to the US, I was Deputy CEO and Chief Operating Officer in our parent company. So I have experience from Europe and US as well as Asia. And now I'm heading up Eolus in the US, and we're based out of San Diego.
Great, thanks. So our focus today is really on just how good of an investment is renewable energy. So to start, thinking about where is renewable energy in the US right now. A lot of renewable energy has really been pushed forward because of policies at the federal level, particularly with respect to taxes. We're getting to a point where the tax credits for both wind and solar are getting to the stage where they're starting to step down and eventually, at least on the wind side, go away completely, sort of absent some change in federal policy. But we're also, at a point where there's a trajectory with renewables where it's probably not going to stop moving forward. And there's a lot of other things at play in the industry in terms of costs, economics, state and regulatory issues. So I'd be interested in hearing from each of you sort of what is your view of the renewables industry today? Where are we? What are the bright spots? What are the struggles that we're going to face as federal policy starts to wind down? Maybe we can start with Armin on this question.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. That's a good question for starting point. What I see is that we have in the US a reliable deal pipeline since years now. So we moved from as an asset manager, in particular from Europe to the US, because what we realized is that the US for a longer time, the more attractive market. You mentioned that we had tax equity. There was a driver from the federal government in the past years. But on the other hand, also a lot of the US states did really a great work here to support renewable energy. And if you compare that then with other regions of the world, it was from the beginning more or less completely competitive. So there was at the end not really a support mechanism we were looking for. Nevertheless, of course, you have now different times, and we have here hiccup in the markets. What we see that we have a postponing of deals here. On the other hand, so what I see, the developers are in a good shape. We have here wind onshore as well as solar as one of the cornerstones of the market. And yeah, so you have to do a deeper look behind the curtains. It's not as it is in other regions with big auctioning, and then you can expect that you are going then for the deal. So look for the sweet spots. Look for, and match it to your USPs. I think your unique selling points. I think that's the secret here.
Hans, being on more of the development side, do you see similar bright spots? Is there anything that you really struggle with, as potentially tax equity winds down?
Well, from my perspective, I think we've just started looking at how little renewables truly has been built here in the US. It's only 10% of wind and solar, and what we are seeing is customers wants this. Costs are trending down. Governments encourage it. Our planet needs this. Obviously, the challenges for renewables are the intermittent nature of it. So it's not always wind. It's sun doesn't shine at night. So the more we build, the more we have to look at the integration cost of this technology. Another issue that I see is that the good spots to some degree could have been taken already, and making our industry mainstream comes also with making it slower and less innovative, so to say. So that is where I see potential issues. But as technology presses or advances, costs are pressing down. So I think the future is pretty good here for us.
Yeah, and to your point that there's customers, ultimately that there's been a big push, even if it's not the federal government, there's customers like Volvo who are coming out and saying this is a priority for us. And Becky, you could speak to that experience and how sort of your view of renewable energy sort of interacts with Hans Christian's experience.
Yeah, definitely. So for us, and especially in South Carolina, I think the brightest spot is the availability and the increase of that. So when we started talking about this and the goal was established a few years ago for Volvo globally, and as we're ramping up in Charleston, availability of renewable energy was very uncertain. Where was it going to come from? How were we going to get it? Was it just going to be a credit, or was it something we could implement on site or with our partners locally? And so I think the brightest spot I've seen so far, especially this year, more and more has been availability. Connecting with companies who are the biogas, for example, just came on our radar earlier this year before COVID. And it's a great story capturing, some biogas from agricultural sites and wastewater treatment facilities, and being able to clean that up and inject it into a pipeline that many industrial users are serviced by, as well as hearing more and more about large-scale solar coming online. So that is a bright spot. I think one of the biggest challenges, and it varies from state to state in the U.S., but for us in South Carolina, the ability to use it directly for our company. We're invested in it, we're committed to it as an international company, but we do not have the ability to directly, for example, use the solar energy directly. It goes back to the grid. So that's a challenge for us. Even with the biogas, we would just be part of the pipeline that it is, injected into. So for us, it's a challenge that even when we invest, we can't get the benefits to be neutral the way we want to be.
Mm-hmm. And what about, and Armin, you talked about there being a hiccup. I assume what you're probably talking about is COVID and the effect that it's generally had on the economy. Have you seen sort of where we are in renewable energy shift a great deal because of the COVID pandemic? And is this something that you think will correct in the next 6 months or so, or are there fundamental things that have changed in the industry because of what's going on right now?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, so definitely. So is an impact of COVID-19? Of course, I think would say for everyone here in the market. So what we see is that a lot of these are postponed now. What we see is that a lot of developers are now working with their plans for 2021, so next year. But that at the end, I would say is a good sign. So we have longer discussions with the developers. The beauty of an asset manager is, and Becky mentioned South Carolina, so we're also there and looking from time to time with a deeper look into the deals there. But the beauty of the asset manager is that you look around. So we did the last deal in California. You can see that a lot of these markets are in a good shape, but it's case by case. And I think that's the most interesting thing. And you have to differentiate at the end. And you have to make sure that when you're going for a deal, you have a really deep dive into that state. And what are the drivers? And one of the drivers, Amanda, you mentioned tax equity. One of the other drivers is plans of the states for their state energy mix. The couple of states who are saying they're 100% renewable energy until 2050. That brings, I would say, a lot of pressure in the next year. So of course, COVID-19 will then at the end be a lost year 2020 for a lot of market competitors here and market developers. But nevertheless, we have to do the work, and that's then the work for the next years. So for me, it's a more optimistic view.
Hans, are you dealing with the same?
Yeah, I completely agree with Armin here. I mean, from my perspective, COVID-19 will be solved soon. Will we have some residual effects or consequences for a while, like issues with traveling and remote work, and we might have to have masks on and stuff like that? And for some businesses, there might be some more fundamental changes in how we're doing things. But generally speaking, this is just a little glitch. The threats for our planet and our humanity's abuse of our planet has much greater consequences for a much longer time. So we need to be more sustainable. We need to become more renewable. So, you know, for the next generation, my kids and your kids. So I think this is renewables is part of the solution. Yes, some of the stuff is slowing down a little bit right now. I can agree with that, but that's just details in my opinion. So if you have some state power, good things will come out of this and will become more effective in the way we're doing things.
I mean, that's a good segue to maybe start talking about, okay, now we know where we are moving forward, what's going to happen with renewables in this country. And as a developer, you know, where do you kind of see yourself going? Be in the context of where are renewables welcomed, what states? There's obviously a huge sort of federal regulatory framework, but then on a state by state basis, you know, maybe South Carolina isn't the state that seems most friendly. You know, I heard another panel once where one of the panelists said that his grandmother could build a solar project and a wind project in Texas because that's how easy it was. It's like, all right, anybody can go into Texas and build it, but where as a developer are you looking at opportunities going forward? Because maybe there's some shifting in the policies outside of just sort of wind in Texas, solar in California.
Yeah, I mean, we are currently active in California, kind of Mountain West, Arizona, Nevada. That's where we are right now. We're looking to spread across the US slowly, but so far we haven't been going to the easy market where my grandma actually can get a permit because what type of you know, additionality do we bring? We are building a project in California right now. Has it been easy? No, not really. It's been pretty darn tough. But so I think from our perspective, we like to go where there's a fundamental need for renewables, where the specific technology in that region makes sense. So in a sunny region, obviously you don't want to maybe develop wind, or maybe you want to develop wind because that balances out solar really well. So we are looking at it fairly opportunistic, although we have a base fundamental view of where we're going next. So without going into those details here, I guess.
And if I could add to that, I think that even though South Carolina doesn't have some of the structure or the regulatory drivers that other states do, in terms of opportunity, it's a very pro-business state. And so we're seeing a lot of international businesses come in. And I think that's where the drive is coming from. It's not, well, and we hope that it will also be supported by legislation and, state and federal. But you've got the European automotive manufacturers and even international Chinese the tire industry. In South Carolina, we have the most tire manufacturers in all of the US. So there's a lot of industry in South Carolina, and those corporate policies coming from, the international companies are driving demand. I would say that one challenge related to the impact of COVID, I agree that, luckily it is kind of more of a blip than a long-term impact. But when we look at it as a business case and how are we going to do this within our plant's budget, using biogas again as an example, where it was already, slightly more expensive compared to just our natural gas supply. It's now, because the price of natural gas has dropped, there's more of a gap. And so it's more expensive to invest currently, so, and it changes obviously, but I would say that's the impact that I see short term. But again, the demand is there, and Volvo, as well as many other companies, are not changing their 2025, 2030, 2040 goals because of COVID.
That is, let me answer to that. That is a really interesting point that Becky made, because one of the drivers here in the market is definitely the corporates. So and we have to be aware of that. So our counterparts for our power purchase agreements, so that is the most important thing to be competitive, are corporates, the big tech firms, but also the big industry. And they are all there. And Becky, I got it right when you said you're also responsible for the market, for the carbon neutralization of the company. So that is also one of the drivers here, once again. So that's not only for the corporates on the industry side, also for the financial industry. I can tell you that we have started with our operations to be carbon neutral a longer time ago, which is, I would say, not a big thing for the insurance industry and the asset manager. But now we have started also to carbon neutralize our portfolios, and that is a game changer, I can tell you. So that is one of the most influencing, I would say, new developments in the markets that could also change renewable energy industry. And by the way, and Hans Christian said it, so it's a mature technology. So we are talking about biogas and solar and wind onshore and offshore. That's the backbone of the industry. It's not a niche market. 50% of all deals in infrastructure last year come from renewable energy.
Yeah, and certainly the corporate push for renewables and sustainability goals has been something that's been very important over the last 4 years, where there's been a dramatic shift in federal policy and attitude towards renewable energy in the US. Thinking about another short-term blip, perhaps, for the renewables market, is any of your behavior changed, or maybe are you putting things on pause because of the election coming up? Do you think that the election will have any significant effect on renewables in the US, or is sort of the trains left the station, things are going, and things like corporate and policies like Volvo's are going to be things that continue pushing it, even if there is less than friendly sort of federal policy?
I think that, again, no matter who's in office in the US, our initiatives are really driven by the Paris Agreement. Whether or not the US is part of it or not really doesn't matter to our manufacturing site. Yes, it happens to be in Charleston, South Carolina in the United States, but overall globally, we are still going towards those goals. Electrification and the recharge within Volvo we're building our company on that whole premise. So, I don't think that I don't even think it's a player for us. Now, of course, it would be helpful if there are, if from a federal level or even a state level, there are better tax incentives, that there's a push or a regulatory driver to have a renewable portfolio. But I think in terms of where we're headed, it's not going to change our direction.
Armin and Hans Christian, are you guys in the same position?
I would agree totally. So I think 100%. That's also my experience here. So that's a longer run, and we don't care about what's going on then in the next 2 months or what something like that. So we are in the market. We would like to stay in the market here. We have our own goals on carbon neutralization. We see renewable energy and green infrastructure in total as a really interesting investment case. And I can tell you there's a really huge appetite of clients would like to invest in renewable energy. It's one of the big trends, and it's the perfect match and a win-win situation for everyone. So you tick all the boxes, ESG and alternatives and what you can imagine. And I don't think that is really a tremendous, let's say, resistance of that. What happens on the federal level or on state level, and of course, so what Becky said. So state level is really important for us. And if that is not maybe the case, let's say in the Midwest, then you go to California or to Illinois. Yeah? But it's interesting to see that also states like Texas are really supporters of renewable energy, where it comes from, because it's really good business.
I agree. I mean, we're past the point where a shift in a government every 4 years would have a material impact on what we're doing. It's just it's not going to happen. So whoever is president, we will continue to build renewables, and Allianz will continue to buy it from us. So
yeah,
right, Armin?
Of course.
Volvo will be looking.
Right.
So all right, so the general consensus seems to be that the election's not going to have a huge effect. Is there anything coming up, not necessarily from like an outside source, but maybe internally? Is there something that you think is going to end up revolutionizing renewables in the next 5 to 10 years that currently is either in its infancy or just not widely adopted?
I would say at the end, and Hans Christian, I think you have also really deep insights here. It's a technological question at the end. So of course now solar and wind, they are mature technologies, as we described that. Yeah, maybe there is a technological disruption in a couple of years, and then we have a different energy mix, or something comes up with a completely different grid connection idea or whatever. But so we are discussing it also since years now. I would say the experts here in the market, they have a really good overview what's going on. So I expect also for the next years, I wouldn't say for the next decades, but for the next years, that what we discussed today, if it is biomass or if it is solar and wind, that will be the backbone of this business. But I'm really interested what's going on with the storage market, grid connection, smart meter, energy efficiency. It's a little bit the bigger story. And also electric vehicles, with all the consumption there in the future, where should that come from? Yeah, definitely not from coal. That will also come from a renewable source, I would say. But that's my assumption here for the market.
And Becky, Volvo's making a shift to non-combustion engines, right?
Yeah, exactly. So for every year, we will have a new model that is all electric. So we had our first model, the XC40, last year, and every year we're launching a new one, which will include the XC90 from Charleston. I believe that's 2022 start, could be 2023, but yeah. And I agree that I think infrastructure is a big part of that. You know, when you think about different states, you know, it may be more common. How is it going to become mainstream everywhere? So the infrastructure for electrification and charging, and exactly. And then, you know, we're not doing all of this to power it with coal. So yeah, that's a big part of it.
Hans Christian, are you guys looking at storage opportunities? You kind of need to be a little bit ahead of the game as the developer who's years out from projects. You know, is there anything else that you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what both are saying, and I think what Armin said specifically as it relates to transmission. I mean, climate change has no borders, and Becky has an issue effectively buying projects in her area because it's isolated there, and we're looking at these small regions. And I think it would be amazing if US dropped the ego and we just skip CAISO, MISO, SVP and all that, and we build an extremely efficient transmission infrastructure where we share power more efficiently and transmit power more efficiently. So I think that is something that would be interesting to look into for companies like ours. And then obviously we have mainstream wind, solar. We are looking into, and that will continue to be bread and butter for us, connected with storage. Storage will have a play. We are developing quite a few plants right now, standalone storage, as well as connected with PV. And there is really no reason for anyone to go after old conventional technologies. Like look at BECKY, for instance. If I'm now the renewable energy developer, we have ARMIN, the investor guy, and then we have the consumer, BECKY at Volvo. So she's launching, or Volvo is launching all these cool new electric cars. And imagine I was able to provide her with power from a renewable energy plant at a fixed rate for a long term, because I know my fuel is free, the wind is free, the sun is free, versus a coal or a fossil fire production. Even if it was the same price or higher, imagine her in the ad advertising and saying, we are so proud that we've been buying power from this coal plant for this very fancy new electric car. I mean, that's anti-marketing. So they just won't do it. So I think we are in a pretty good spot, even if we're not getting after the most new advanced technologies. Do I think that there will come better stuff down the line? Of course I do. Like it will happen. Just look at the repower project we're doing in California. We're building a couple new turbines, or 13, and we're taking out 400, and these new ones will produce 4 times the energy of the old 400. I mean, it's just crazy. So there's really no reason to think about old fossil-fired generation if you have a choice, in my opinion. But in all cases, you don't have a choice. So I think that's where we need to do some work.
Yeah, may I here add one really brief remark on that side? I fully agree. And what is also important to that every country is in competition to other regions of the world. And when you look around, I would say there are a lot of countries doing really huge investments in infrastructure. And I would say for the United States, infrastructure is one of the most important topics we have to solve here in the near future. And you can imagine, I'm based in New York City. I'm definitely know what I'm talking about. So the infrastructure here is a big topic. And we talked about electric cars and then charging stations and mobility and grid connections and whatever. So we need a little bit more, maybe fantasy, and also then, of course, at the end, the money and the investments then to do that. The real asset is a big thing. Real assets are great opportunity for investments. I would say the investment potential is there, and renewable energy, but also electric cars and energy efficiency are a big part of that. That's future.
That's wonderful. So overall, it sounds very positive that it does make sense to invest in renewable projects, not just for the sustainability goals, but the economics are starting to work out. We're running out of time, so I just want to take this opportunity to thank our panelists. This was very interesting. I know this conversation could go on for probably another hour easily, but thank you all for joining us today, and we'll send it back to you guys at the House of Sweden. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.